What I have next to me is a 2013 Volkswagen Touareg, a very capable SUV and one that has a legacy of both performance and luxury. It has been recognized all over the world for setting standards in the SUV category. However, if you're buying this off the shelf, it's going to cost you around 5 million to 5.5 million depending on the variant of the particular Touareg. However, if you have, not as much money, but you still want a vehicle that is going to define you, a vehicle that is custom made, a vehicle that will suit your tastes and preference, you can choose to get this. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is a 1993 Land Rover Defender 110. Doesn't look like a 1993? Yeah, I'll explain why. Because guess what? Mnaweza tuita mgongo because we are back. And kama kawa, I'm your host, Eric Wakabi, Eric with a CK. And I am ready to start this new chapter of automotive content with you guys. Not only about car reviews, it's about his name is Dr. Washira, but I'll let him introduce himself and tell us what inspired him to build this. And most importantly, tell us about the badging, because normally we would see Defender on this.
Yeah. Certainly. Well, first, let me say thank you for having me on the set. It's definitely a pleasure. So I've always wanted a Land Rover Defender from a long time ago. My father, first car that he rode in was a Land Rover. And he kept us telling stories about Land Rover. And I'm a big car fanatic myself. So I came to Kenya around 2021, visited my garage, my mechanic, his name is John. And I happened to see a whole bunch of Defenders around. And I asked him what he's doing with them. And he said, well, I build Defenders. And I said, oh, this is good. And I pointed to this one at the time. It was a single cab. And I said, what are you doing with that one? I said, oh, we just bought it from the Ministry of Agriculture. We're planning on rebuilding it. I said, I want it. What do you want? I went through, in terms of what I really wanted. If you remember, Land Rover stopped production of Defenders in 2016. Yeah. So when they stopped production of them, Land Rover actually bought back a few Defenders and they rebuilt them nuts and bolt reconstruction for what we call the Land Rover Defender Autobiography Edition. Yeah. And then, came to the badging, as you asked, and yeah, you're right, most people put Defender on it. So one of the problems that I have had, at least in this country, is usually when I drive, people think I'm the driver of whoever it is that I'm carrying. So whenever we go with my wife, we last went to Villa Rosa Kempinski, and they thought I was the driver. They said, well, welcome Geni Pale, park gari yapo, and then come in. So I parked the car, then came in. Mesema auto ingie. Mesema yeah, acha niingie nikunywe chai. So I decided to put Mocorino, and then, with the hope that, people will not assume I'm the driver. And it was a play on the joke. Okay, so, let's put this badging that's slightly different, kind of more in your face, and let's take what technically is an insult and turn it into something fun.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So now another quick question. If you look at the font and the badge itself, it's very similar to what you would find on a Defender.
Yeah.
The Defender badge.
Yeah. So thankfully, the letterings are the same size. So what I did was, I knew I could have easily gotten letters and just put them in there, but I wanted them to match the sizing and the type that the Defender comes in. So John, my mechanic, called up his counterparts in the UK who make the badging, and we said, hey, we want to make this lettering. Can you make it for us in the exact same specs and original size that the Defender comes in? So we did that for the back and the front. The back ones came. This one took a while, but then they made them, shipped them over, and so they're the exact same size that you would find on the Defender or Land Rover badging. So in terms of make and in terms of size, they are spot on. So then it keeps that very original look, same number of letters, and then same spacings, and it looks very, very stock, which is what I wanted it to do.
And also very, very, very original. Huh?
Yeah, there's a uniqueness to it. And then when they came, we painted them, body color, and yeah, so I really like them. Yeah.
Now, talking about body color, again, what was the inspiration? The dual toning, because it looks really good when you look at this car.
Yeah.
What inspired the dual toning?
Yeah. So I'm my friends joke I'm more flamboyant when it comes to colors. Yes. You can tell that by my fashion and my dress. So I wanted, there are two things for me that I do when I'm picking colors. The first one is, the statement that it's presenting. So I want it to be loud, but not necessarily shouting. Two, I want it to be different. And then three, this place is dusty. So I didn't want a car that, I need to wash all the time. And if it gets muddy, it will be okay. So I started playing around with colors. I knew for sure it was going to be black. This is Santorini black on the top side, a little bit away from the wheels so you don't get as much dirt. And then, black overall doesn't fade very well, especially as you wash it. It swirls, it picks up dust and imperfections much easier. So right then when I was researching the car, I came across this body color, but it was a slightly more copperish tonish. And then, of course, you've probably seen the black and the orange one,
yes,
which is more common. So that one shouts a little bit too much, but I wanted something that more blends in, something that also, if you put it in on the African sun or the African savanna, it doesn't feel, if you put an orange car on the African savanna, it kind of sticks out. The other aspect of it, I didn't want a black, and I didn't want a white car, and I didn't want a silver car, which are more common colors that you find here. We printed a few panels. So I would go home with 3 or 4 panels, and I would look at them in different lights, in the shade, in the shadow, bright sun. I would get them wet, and take a look at them, because I would really wanted, once you get your car color, you have to live with it. Yes. So I think it turned out well, getting the vision, to get even the mechanics to build what you want. And actually, when I sent the car color to John, he goes, this is impressive. I would never have thought of combining these 2 colors. It's like copper and bronze and black. So it ended up being very well. Yeah. So that was essentially the inspiration behind it. And then, compared to some of my other friends, I can go a week, 2 weeks without washing my car, and it still looks fine, at least on the copper side. And you will notice when you haven't washed it for a while, the black is a lot more dustier than this one. So this one blends in very well.
Now, from that part of the story, I would like us to talk about the most interesting part any car enthusiast want to hear about, and that is the engine. And let me do the honors.
Sure.
Oops. Okay.
You found it? And here we go.
So there we go. Now, one thing you will note, without being told, something that even the layman can tell is that this engine sits higher compared to that of a normal 300 TDI.
Yeah.
So basically, it looks like you decided to go all in with the Puma.
Yeah, yeah. So in terms of the car, the whole entire car is a full nut and bolt reconstruction.
Yes.
So the only thing that really remained from the previous car is the chassis and a few body panels. Pretty much everything else, from the wiring to the electronics, every bolt is new on this car. We took it down, galvanized the chassis, and then just rebuilt it. From the ground up. And then a lot of people, of course, the Puma dash looks nice because
Yes.
of the hump. A lot of people put a Puma dash but still have a 200 TDI or 300 TDI. This one you actually need it because of the space. And you'll also notice this, what do you call, the grill sits farther because it has the intercooler, because it's turbocharged as well. I wanted a more modern engine. Yes, of course, you could use the 300 TDI and rebuild it and everything else, but the problem with that, you get very good power, but I also wanted a significant amount of speed, which is where I put this one in. So this one came from 2016 Land Rover 2016 Land Rover Defender. So we flew it in from the UK. Same thing with the transmission. So those were the only things that I more essentially used, got them very low mileage. So then, of course, then we started building the car around it. I want to be able to do 140, 150 without feeling any problems whatsoever. It has a lot of low-end torque, so on hills it's just amazing performance. And then it goes from 5-speed now to a 6-speed transmission. So the transmission is also pretty good. A few things that we changed, the Defenders are known, ukishift, unaguza mtu, So this one has, we put a short throw gear lever, so it shifts like a Subaru. It's very, very small, so not a lot of movement.
What did you do with the DPF? Because if it came from a 2016 Defender, definitely there was a DPF.
So that one is removed, so it's straight piped all the way in.
Yes.
In terms of the exhaust. That's another big thing that we did. It has a demand exhaust, which, if you know Defenders or Land Rovers, is probably one of the best exhaust systems you can get.
Yes.
So we removed that. Of course, the new ones have better emissions than that's why they changed the engine so that it can pass the European emissions test.
Yes.
But to your question, with any car, not just this one, cars that have bad reputation for dependability there's a correlation, if not causation, with terms of how someone maintains a car, especially if you're buying a late model and something that's been used and you don't know the ownership beyond it. So people will be surprised to find out that on the 300 TDI or 200 TDIs, the same engines that they were putting in the Discovery, they were just torqued differently.
Yes.
So it's the exact same engine. This one was more of a farm truck, so it had a lot of low-end torque. You could pull a lot of weights, whereas on the Discovery, same engine, just built for more highway driving.
Yeah.
But the problem with these cars, or any cars in general, is people fail to follow the manufacturer recommendations. Thankfully, these cars are remarkably forgiving in terms of it. But if you start to skimp on service intervals, I think I mentioned it to you, a car is not like a body weight heels. So you have control arms going out, you refuse to replace them, start messing up your suspension, starts messing up your shock, your alignment is off, your wheels are off, all of a sudden your brakes start wearing out, your tires are wearing out at different intervals, and so you find that those are things that people complain about, but it's usually a sensor or something else that the manufacturer said replace, ukasema iko mzuri, dusted it off, put it back, inakuletea shida.
You mentioned that you can comfortably do 140 kilometers per hour on a Defender. And that brings out another topic of discussion, and that is the suspension, because Defenders are known for wobble. So what work have you done on the suspension?
So on this one, and I'll send you the pictures, once we stripped the car, we built everything from the ground up. New fuel lines, everything is new on it. So the suspension, for me, I knew it was going to be my daily driver. So these cars, as you can tell, they sit pretty high. So the center of gravity is a little off. They have a lot more body roll than the typical, Subaru or whatever. So if you want that, you have to counter that, you have to put a lot of, inputs into the suspension. So one of the things that we've done, if you look at the undercarriage of the car, you'll see there are anti-sway bars. These yellow bars that go across. You can kind of see it there.
Yeah.
So that stops some of the body roll. Of course, if you're going to go off-roading, you need to unplug it so that you can get the displacement of the
Maximum,
yeah,
the wheel articulation.
Yeah, the wheel articulation. But of course, I'm not off-roading every day. So for most parts, you know, it stays on. Yeah.
We are lucky to have a beautiful country, but
Yeah.
our roads can shift from being very smooth to being a nightmare.
Yep.
And the other drastic change that was on this car was initially it was a single cab 110 pickup.
Yep.
And now it's a dual cab
Yeah.
110 pickup. So how did you go? How did you go about the conversion? Because it's interesting. And why did you choose to go double cab over single cab?
That's one of the beautiful things about Defenders. It's like a Lego. You can, I mean, I could take it to a mechanic, and tomorrow this can be a full station wagon. The reason why I wanted it to be a double cab is because I just didn't want to be carrying one extra person. Because on the other ones, you remember they had the bucket seat.
Yes.
So you would have the long seat, so you can take 3 people in the front, but it's not a very comfortable ride, especially if you're the one in the middle. So remove that, and you put 2 bucket seats. You have the the gearbox in the middle, and have more comfortable. And then I wanted to be able to carry rear passengers comfortably. So that's hence why we did that.
One thing we know about Kenya is that if you want to have a job done, because this paint job it's impeccable. You know, you can barely criticize it. You cannot criticize it. So how was that journey, trying to identify someone who could actually transform this,
the vision,
the vision, like an old Ratley Defender into a masterpiece like this one? So how did you identify?
The first part, which is I find it interesting, is that I think we had this conversation last week, is that you have mechanics in Kenya, but what's a good mechanic or a praiseworthy mechanic? Surprisingly, it's someone who actually does their job. The job that you're paying them to do, and I find 100%, and then they allowed it over. Which for me, I'm like, that's what you should be doing anyway. That's what I'm paying you. So it was very difficult to find a mechanic. A mechanic's like a good doctor. So me, when I found John at New Bold Garage, in Kilimani, also a Parts Direct, perfect marriage for us is that. And I noticed that on the Range Rover because he's the one who services my car. So what I love about the paintwork and the bodywork is that, John is there with you in terms of detail. So we want, I'm talking about looking at the grains of paint and be like, okay, we want a little bit more metallic in that. The other thing is that hamix kwa bucket.
Unatoa panel unaenda kuchanganya nayo.
No, these they are mixed by the computer. So this paint color, he now has saved the paint code. So now I just, because this one was a Land Rover one. This one was inspired by Land Rover, but it was like my own. No one has this color. So, but now if I need to place anything, he has a paint code. We go and mix exactly what it is that we want. So that attention to detail was great. The other thing is that he has a full painting booth that is almost vacuum sealed. So I paint inje, where you like kando ya barabara, dust, and you're wondering why is the thing having a reaction. On the leather work, that has been done 3 times now. It cost me a lot. You try to save money, and then you end up paying 3 times the amount that you would have, and then also destroying your dash because imagine
it's stitched again
and
then
stitching to it. Now this is like, oh, you have to. I've got a new steering wheel that's coming in because it was stitched and restitched again. You're like, okay, I need it as imeharibu. So those things, I find that if you just go a little bit up, then you kind of get better quality. And that's one of the things that I like about Stitch, at least Stitch by Wash. And there are a few other people I know who can do that particular job. But I also find with a lot of mechanics, unfortunately, there is like, you have to be really pushing on quality. And if you push on quality, it increases the price. So, for mine, the perfection aspect, increase the price a little bit because I'm like, no, as like, that thread needs to match identical to the seat. I don't care if you get a Boda guy, you go to every single stitch shop, because that's what we did. And you find the thread that we want, so that when you're looking at it, they're the same thread. And because the seats already came like that, and that's what we're using as a base. So that part, I would say, it was a little frustrating. The other part that was frustrating was the radio, and I've learned some things on this. If you're gonna do any aesthetic work, do it at the end. So do your leather work at the end, do your tinting, because the tinting has to be redone now because it was done before the leather was done, and then of course it's bound to get damaged. If you're taking in the dash, what a scratch the window. There's no way you're gonna get that dash without kuguza mlango. So then now you have to like take it back. So what I've realized now, if anyone comes and tells me how to build a Defender, I can tell you, in stage 1, I did 7, and then I came to find out that it should have been 10 because now I have to redo it
again. In Kenya, we have guys who will, be patient enough to build, and guys who prefer buying it off the shelf. So for you, why did you feel that you want to go towards the building direction?
It was a financial decision. So in Kenya, unfortunately, because of the way our duty system is and the way just the laws and the systems are designed, it is very difficult to get a new car. And when you get a new car, it is remarkably expensive, which doesn't make sense from a tax perspective, because the whole idea that we're trying to do is incentivize people to buy more modern, more fuel-efficient cars, so that we reduce smog, we reduce traffic jams and so forth. But then the cars that do that, we tax them, at 200%.
Exorbitant.
So, from a behavioral change perspective, it doesn't make any sense, because who would buy a 2023 car when I can buy a 2018 car and not pay that much in duty? One, because of depreciation and everything else. Whereas in the US, it's quite simple. It doesn't matter what you're buying, old or new, flat rate, 8%, okay? And it becomes very clear. So even from a decision-making perspective, it does. So a friend of mine bought a car around the same time that I was interested in bringing a car in here. So I researched, I was looking at G-Wagons, I was looking at Range Rover, I was looking at even Audis, and I was gonna bring a car in. But my friend bought a car for 1.2 million Kenya shillings, and then, which was a great deal if that's what it was, a nice Audi. But then ended up paying 1.8 million in duty.
Whoa!
Right? So then you get that car for 3 million, and you're like, but it's still a 6-year-old car, okay, with the problems from the previous owner and everything else. And that's why I said it was a financial decision. I said, well, I could rebuild my whole car from scratch for roughly the same price, not have to worry about duty, have a 0 mileage car, because this car just clocked 700 kilometers, because I've had it now for 3 weeks, and not have to inherit any of those problems. So you start from a purely blank slate, from the same price as bringing in a car. Because now we bought this for 300,000 Kenya shillings. That's what the donor car was from GOK, Ministry of Agriculture. Just took it out, you just need the shell, because then you don't. Now the problem with our institutions in terms of the law, you can't really build your own car, because they're going to ask you vini ko api, all this other stuff, and then they're explaining, no, nimejenga, ni yangu. It's like, so this car is brand new, 700 kilometers on it, but it has a 1993 logbook. But there's nothing existing from 1993, with the exception of the VIN. We kept the VIN, which is what we put there, and the chassis. Nothing else survived from that car.
I think we really need to review our policy as a country, especially when it comes to cars, because I understand you also had to do tape lifting so that you can change the particulars of the car.
It's
and all that.
Then insurance is so the car is insured outside Kenya, because one of the biggest problems, and by the way, if there's anyone watching who's going to insure this car, let me know, of course. So when you go to our insurance companies, they will not insure a car that's more than 8 years old comprehensive.
Yes.
So when they look at the stuff, they say it's a 1993 car. I was like, yes. I mean, that's because I can't change the logbook, but the whole car, and you show them the proof, the whole car has been built, you give them the whole entire thing, whole entire build. Is like, I want to insure this car for 5 million. That's what I want to insure. But it's like, well, we can only do that party. So I'm not going to spend 5 million on a car and then go insure it that party, especially one that I love. So what do? I have to go outside, to the UK, to the US, South Africa, and find an insurance that wants to insure the car and will insure it for the value that I tell them. So that's what I've done.
Okay. Now, the question would be, you have insured the car elsewhere and not in the country. So how does that work in terms of insurance jurisdiction and compensation?
Oh yeah. So it covers the same way. If you're familiar with the COMESA type of insurance aspect. So what you're going to do if you're planning to insure your car outside Kenya, and most, by the way, it's by Old Mutual, which is Old Mutual still in Kenya, but Old Mutual Kenya wouldn't do it. So I'd use Old Mutual South Africa. So now on the territorial limits, you just tell them the countries. So this one is covered in all of SADC and all of, so I don't have to get any insurance if I'm going to Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, Burundi, Angola, Zimbabwe, Zambia, all those places, South Africa, same one insurance policy. So then what I liked was the territory, because I like to drive. So when I'm, I drove from Harare to Nairobi. I don't want to be like, okay, sign insurance tutafanya nini and whatever. On top of it, it is cheaper than insuring it here, because I'm paying on this one, I'm paying the whole entire policy. I'm paying $800 a year for this car, which is, if you convert it to even at the current exchange rate, that's like 120,000 for full comprehensive, which is very difficult to find here. Alafu mbishani, like with if something happens, they're like, okay, they have covered it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there you have it, guys. You can insure your car outside Kenya. That's quite insightful.
Yeah.
Not many people know that.
Yeah.
And at least that should spell a word to Kenyan underwriters.
Yeah.
Because they are losing a lot of business.
Yeah.
Again, how we do insurance
Yeah.
here is quite, archaic. Because
Yeah, archaic, yeah.
You look at it, you and I are paying the same insurance, right?
If I hit you in an accident, you want me to hit you as opposed to the guy driving that car, because the medical limits, everything else is significantly much higher than what you would find here. So I'm bishani that whole entire thing. I think a large part of it is maybe from abuse of insurance policies as well. Yes. So they're not likely to cover. You have to tell them such tall stories, and everything else. Whereas the last time, because I have the same thing on the Range Rover, it got hit. They didn't even come to take a look at it. I just gave them the police report, took it to they asked for 2 quotes, and then they just wired the money, and then you fix the car.
I think we as Kenyans have a lot of work to do when it comes to matters insurance. Thank you so much, Daktari. And there we have it. Instead of buying a car off the shelf, if you have the patience and also the heart, projects, I keep on telling them, projects inahitaji more. Sometimes you'll be very frustrated, but you have to have the passion and the resilience to continue. But the best part of this whole interview is that you can save some money.
Significantly.
Significant amount of money by building your own car. So we're going to take a drive with Daktari, and so that I can also get to experience how this beauty really feels on the road. I've been your host. Reduces rollback
Yeah.
by a huge percentage. And now, since you're a money person,
Yeah.
let's talk about value for money.
Yeah. We can make this roundabout and go to the right.
Okay.
Yeah. We can go through the estate if we want to. Take a longer drive. Yeah, just follow those guys. So you're saying value for money?
Yeah, let's talk about value for money.
Yeah.
How being a money person, do you
Mhm.
think that this is a good alternative to maybe a Kenyan who owns a unique vehicle that is almost custom made, something that you can't get off the shelf? Because sometimes we look for cars, but you're limited because you can only buy what somebody else has made.
Yeah, yeah. And then you're inheriting the problems and everything else.
Yes.
I think from a value for money perspective, it is. You know, in the US, a car like this would be essentially unaffordable for even me, because I would expect to be spending 250, 300,000. That's what the Defenders, this model from East Coast Defenders, are going for.
Yes.
But now, with this one, you're able to spend the same amount of money, sometimes less, than you would be buying a Prado that's used or another small station wagon. And you get a lot of, not only value for money, but that feeling, because the car is unique to you. So from a value for money perspective, I would encourage anyone, if you're in the market for buying a car and you're planning on spending 3 million, rather than buying a used car that you will inherit problems with, you can get something that's just unique to you by building. And it doesn't just have to be a Defender, it can be other cars as well.
Yeah.
The Land Cruisers take very well to it. The Mercedes-Benz W123, W124. There are so many of these cars that are around in plenty that the parts are easy to come by.
Oh yeah. And especially the Benzes. The Benzes are interesting builds. I understand you have one as well.
Yeah. I just my wife got it for me for Christmas actually.
Oh, nice.
A Mercedes-Benz W123, a 1982. 2-liter petrol. So I'm very excited about it actually. That's my next build. So hopefully that one I'm actually building to take it to stateside.
Oh.
Yeah.
And they are going to allow you to, actually I believe there is an exportation process from Kenya.
Yeah. Get
it deregistered, then get a police clearance report.
Yeah, the Interpol report, and then you just send it off. In the US, it's quite easy to import cars. If you're importing a car that had been made for the US market, you don't have any issues whatsoever.
Yes.
In this particular case, because it's a classic, it meets the 25-year rule. So the car has to be older than 25 years and in original condition. And by original condition, they just mean it can't be heavily modified.
Yes.
So this car that we're driving in would not meet the requirements for original condition, because it was a single cab, now it's a crew cab, so the engine has been changed, the transmission has been changed, so it needs to be in its original chassis, it needs to have its original engine or an equivalent, and its original transmission or an equivalent from the same model year that it came from. So then you're able to take it.
Remember to subscribe to the channel so that you can be getting more of these alluring, insightful and breathtaking reviews of cars and connections, because at Auto Connect it's not only about car reviews, it's about connecting to these cars, knowing more about them, and even having the stories of the people who have been able to bring them to life.